Hello, my friends. Hello, it's Matthew Street. Welcome to my channel. As always, I truly appreciate you being here. And folks, this video is dedicated to some YouTube friends of mine, Sal and his wife Cheryl out there. Cheryl is a big fan of the artist I'm about to speak about. And so I'd like to dedicate this video to Cheryl and Sal. And folks, without further ado, I know when I do videos like this, they're not going to get a ton of views. I get it, okay? I'm a Beatles-centric channel, and that's where my bread and butter is, when I talk about the Beatles or offer my opinion about the Beatles. But folks, every so often, I like to speak about other artists that I really like and enjoy. And I'm going to speak again about an artist I did a video on about not too long ago, basically a general video about him. Folks, I'm a big fan of singer-songwriter artists, musical artists. And there's so many of them out there, especially during my youth days or my younger days growing up in the 70s, guys like Jim Croce and obviously James Taylor is a big one, and Gordon Lightfoot, Harry Chapin, and there's so many singer-songwriters, and some of them are recognized more than others. Some of them are given more attention. Some of them, their legacy seems to have stretched further than others. But there's one, my favorite singer-songwriter, male singer-songwriter of all time, is John Denver. I have been a John Denver fan since I was a young boy. Again, I've done a couple of videos about him in the past, and I'll put the link to one of those below if you want to check it out. But I've been a fan of his for a long time, especially growing up as a kid. And you know what a Beatles fan I am. Do I need to tell you? I'm into the rock and roll and the power pop and all that. But there's something about John Denver and his music that always struck a nerve with me and always resonated with me. And I've been a fan since I was very young, as far back as I can remember, with first hearing his big hits. Now, my parents had his first greatest hits album. That's that really famous greatest hits album from, I think, 1973. I was 11 or 12 at the time. And that thing was played and played and played. I knew it by heart. I studied the cover of that album where John's wearing kind of the hat like I'm wearing now, and he's got his glasses on, and he's big smile, and the sun behind him. Just a great image. You have to remember, folks, if you're from my age group, and many of you are not, because I'm old, but if you can try to picture it, you younger people that don't remember the 1970s, John Denver was a 70s musical icon. He was one of the legends of the 70s. You know how you have the Mount Rushmore of music for each decade? The 50s, you got the rock pioneers. In the 60s, you got the Beatles, the Beach Boys, the Byrds, blah, 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 blah. The 60s icons, the Rolling Stones. The 70s, John Denver was on that Mount Rushmore. And those of you that are my age or in my age category can back me up on this. Elton John was on the Mount Rushmore of the 70s. Led Zeppelin, Aerosmith, Alice Cooper, the Bee Gees, even Paul McCartney and Wings on some level were on that Mount Rushmore of the 70s. Linda Ronstadt, on some level, Donna Summer and Diana Ross were on that Mount Rushmore of the 70s, you know what I mean? But John Denver, you have to put him on that Mount Rushmore of the 70s. He was an icon of that decade. I mean, this guy had so many hits, and I mean, to the point, he was even hosted the Grammys. He hosted the Grammys on several occasions during the 70s and into the early 80s, I believe. He was such an icon, and he was a great host, by the way, too. He did the Grammys justice. But anyway, when you think of those early hits, the hits he had throughout the 70s, don't forget he signed to RCA as a solo artist in 1969, put out his first album, and he was off to the races after that, with albums like Take Me Home, Country Roads, and Rocky Mountain High, and Back Home Again, and Wind Song. I mean, he had so many big top smash gold and platinum albums. And then the hits, Leaving on a Jet Plane, his first big hit. Take Me Home, Country Roads, as I said, Rocky Mountain High, Annie Song, Calypso, Back Home Again. I mean, it could go on and on. This man had so many top 10 hits, top 40 hits. But let's be honest, by the time the early 80s rolled around, things had started to fade off a bit for John. He was still big in his concerts. He did a lot of touring all across the world, and he sold out his shows, and he was very involved in social issues, involved in things, you know, bringing peace to the world and all that stuff. So he was still very involved and a very visible figure in that regard. But his star as a musical pop star was not shining as bright during the 1980s towards the end of his career. Now, we could do videos about his big smash albums from the 70s, you know, all day. But I thought for this video, I would do something a little different for you folks to maybe turn on some of you people in my age category that have never gotten into this part of his career, or some of you younger folks that may know the big hits on the Greatest Hits, Volume 1, 2, or 3, but you really don't, you know, follow them without. I want to talk about the last 10 years or so of John's recording career. Now, he passed away tragically in a plane crash, oh boy, this month in 1997. Wow, hard to believe, but it was in October of 1997. He was in a single pilot-only experimental plane, and he crashed over Monterey Bay in California and died instantly. Tragedy. He was only 53 years old, imagine that. But he hadn't recorded a brand new studio album of new studio material in 6 years. His last studio album was in 1991. And I just thought I would go through that last 10 years or so of his career real quick with you and show you that even though he was not in the public eye as far as a big pop star anymore in the 80s coming into the early 90s, he still had a lot of great material. He still put out some really fine albums, and albums you may want to give another chance or give a first chance to and explore. There's some hits in the bunch, and I'll explain those. There's some misses, but I have to say there's lots of hits. I would say more so that these albums contain more hits, positive. When I say hits, I mean positives than negatives, okay? And I will talk about the negatives as they come up. There's a lot of lost nuggets in this series of albums. And I would say give them a try, and it won't hurt you to get, you know, see what you think of these albums. Now, there's 8 albums altogether beginning in 1981. Now, some of them, there's one of them actually. I'm going to do CDs to make it easier, but there's one of them that I've really not been a big fan of, so I only have it on vinyl from when I bought it way back when it first came out. But I'm going to use CDs to make this easier. Now, the first one I want to speak about, this is after John's decline in his pop star career of the 70s, came out in 1981. It's called Some Days Are Diamonds. This is a great album. For you fans of country rock, country music, Americana, that type of thing, I think you'd really like Some Days Are Diamonds from 1981. This is like John's country album, okay, if that makes sense. This is when he really got down into really doing some country music, laid back. I mean, you could just the cover, wearing the vest, and just, you know, the whole look, the vibe of it. Here's the back with the song listing. Again, I don't know how it's going to translate. I'll do my best here with these CDs. But Some Days Are Diamonds is a great little album. I enjoy it. I go back to it a lot. Was it a big hit? No. Like I said, this is early 80s, 1981. His career as a musical pop legend is on the decline, but he's still putting out great material like this. So I highly recommend Some Days Are Diamonds from 1981. Now, a year later, he put out one of the finest albums of his career, in my opinion, 1982. And that's the album called Seasons of the Heart. I love the cover, love the artwork of it. And again, you're not going to be able to see these song titles. It's all in red and whatnot. But Seasons of the Heart is one of John Denver's finest studio albums in 1982. It contained his final top 40 hit. He didn't really have, he might have had a minor country hit on this album here, but not, you know, no real big hits, so to speak. But, you know, top 100 Billboard, last top 40 hit is on this album. It's called Shanghai Breezes. I have a brain fart here. Shanghai Breezes made the top 40. It was somewhere in the middle of the top 40. I want to say made it to like number 20 or so. Last big top 40 hit for John Denver, 1982. This album is an absolutely stunner, folks. This is a great, great album. This album is like, if you've ever been in a relationship that is broken up, or you hear about people who divorce or separations and whatnot, this album is a real heartbreaker, a tearjerker in that regard. It's a breakup album. He was going through the separation of his longtime love of his life, Annie, who he wrote the song Annie song for. And this album reflects that breakup of a relationship and the seasons of the heart. How, you know, it's spring, it's a new love, and then it's blooming in the summer. It's at its heat, it's summer best, but then it goes into the period of autumn where the love fades a little bit, and winter it's dead. You know what I mean? It's one of those albums. It's a heartbreaker because it's about breaking up and leaving and separating from someone. But the music on it is just absolutely beautiful, and it's just a wonderful all-around album. And like I'll always say on these albums, if I'm giving it a thumbs up like these two, I love these two here. You know, this might be one or two songs on it that I could kind of like skip over. There might be like one on Seasons of the Heart that, you know, that I might skip. But what I'm saying is overall, so far, these two are hits for me. I would highly recommend these first two. Seasons of the Heart, though, is one of his best ever. Now, his next album came out only a year later, and I think it was a little bit rushed. It came out in 1983, and it's called It's About Time. And I don't even have it on CD because I really don't care for this album. Now, is it a totally terrible album? No, there were some flashes of good stuff on here, but I think it was a little bit of a rushed album. It came out only a year after the triumphant release of Seasons of the Heart, which is one of my favorite John Denver albums of all time. And then a year later, he comes out with this. So I had high expectations, you know. Right away, I didn't like the cover. I mean, this was great artwork, just a beautiful cover of John coming down some ancient ruined steps there in Shanghai. And this one, I just can't stand it. It screams 80s, 1983. So it screams 80s with the logo and the suit he's wearing, the white suit. He's out in the wilderness there, but he's wearing that suit. Looks like Don Johnson from Miami Vice or something. I just never liked the cover. I never liked the whole artwork of it and you know, showing the globe inside. I don't know. I just never liked the artwork. So that turned me off right away. And it seems like a lot of leftovers from Seasons of the Heart. There's a couple of songs on here that are kind of about love lost and whatnot. You know, like I said, this is brilliant. But then this one, it seems like it got the leftovers, you know what I mean? And then there's a couple of songs, he's trying to go in a pop direction on here, and it just seems awkward having those breakup songs mixed in with him trying to be modern 80s pop. It just doesn't fly for me. So It's About Time, 1983, not one of my favorites. I don't go back to it often. Now, the next one is when he tried to take It's About Time in that pop direction to the 9th degree. He tried to and he did it with this album. 1985, he put out Dreamland Express. Now, I like this one much better than It's About Time. You would say, Matt, how can you, if you're a big John Denver fan for classic John Denver, you know, singer-songwriter, how can you like John Denver putting out a pop album? Well, he tried it with this one. Like I said, Dreamland Express is John Denver's 80s pop album. And it came out right in the middle of the 80s, 1985. Snap dab in the middle. And I got to tell you, it's not bad. Okay? I like it. There's times I get in the mood for this album, and he did a good job, much better than him trying to dip his toe in the water with this one in the pop realm. This was kind of half-baked, in my opinion. This one, I think he finally became fully realized. This is a good John Denver 80s pop album. And I know that doesn't seem, all those terms don't seem to go together. John Denver, 80s, pop, you know, it doesn't blend, but it works on here for me. This is a good album. There's a lot of great material on here. There's only, out of the 11 songs, there's only like 2 that I would skip. They're like, I just got to get past them. They're just not good for me. But I've got to tell you, the majority of the album is a good little pop album. He did it right. He did it in what John Denver should do as far as a pop album. He's not trying to be, the Jets here or Madonna or, or Duran Duran. He's not trying to do that. He's being John Denver, but doing a more contemporary pop record. And it does work, like I said, for the most part on Dreamland Express. So I would recommend this as a curiosity. Listen to it, check it out. There were some great, fabulous songs on here. I mean, there's just some wonderful material. I think you'd really enjoy it. A couple of these songs on here are some of my favorite John Denver songs ever. So check it out. Now, in 1986, again, only a year later, he puts out what would be his final album for RCA. Oh man, I mean, after being on the label for just about 20 years, he was a staple. Elvis was a staple and is still a staple on RCA. John Denver for 20 years was a staple on RCA Records. But finally, by 1986, like I said, the star wasn't shining as bright for John, and RCA decided to drop him after this album. This is his final album for RCA. It's called One World. And I got to say, this was a return to form on most levels here. Where he finally got to realizing his pop dream here with Dreamland Express in 1985. Because that album didn't do as well as expected, obviously, people weren't ready to accept John as a pop star, so to speak, but it's a good album. He gets back to his roots, basically, on this one a little bit. This one is getting back to speaking about the environment and the mountains and love is the master of all we do. And just great John Denver material. He's getting back to his roots here. There's a great song on here he wrote after the disaster of the Challenger when we lost all the astronauts in 1986 on that terrible, terrible shuttle disaster. He writes a beautiful song on here. One of the best songs he's ever done, called Flying for Me, is on this album, and it's absolutely stunning. I mean, this album is worth it for that song alone, but there's a lot of other great material on here. I do love this album. Like I said, like any album from this period, there's maybe one or two that I skip, but for the most part, it's a darn good, well put together album. His final one for RCA, 1986, One World. Well, after that, he was on his own, no major label. So he basically kind of started his own label called the Windstar label. And he got involved, as you know, John Denver did some acting during the late 70s into the 80s. He starred in a lot of good TV movies. They're very family-friendly movies. If you're into, if you want looking for something that's good for families and just good, wholesome, clean fun, he did a lot of good material in that regard as far as movies and TV movies. His first, obviously, major acting career gig was Oh God with George Burns in 1977. Big, big hit, great movie, check it out. But he did a lot of acting after that, and he was in several made-for-TV films and some made for theaters. But one he was in was took place in Alaska. It was about a bush pilot and some of the different things he was doing and some of the drama he was involved in being a bush pilot up in Alaska. And I believe the movie's name was called Higher Ground, because this isn't really a soundtrack, but the album that came out in 1988 coinciding with that movie is also called Higher Ground. Again, it's on the Windstar label, so now he's off RCA and he's doing his own things here. And even on the back, you can see there's some stills from the movie on the back of the CD here. Now, all John's RCA albums are released on vinyl. You can get them on vinyl. Unfortunately, unless that's changed, I don't think it has, all of his last three albums on Windstar before he stopped recording are only CD only, and I believe they're very hard to find. So if you can get them, you can get them on Spotify, streaming, and listen to them, no problem. But to get a physical copy might be a little difficult. You can let me know on that. Higher Ground is a great, great album. Again, where his final RCA one was getting back to his roots after his pop experiment. Okay, he takes it further on this one with that TV movie, Higher Ground. Very John Denver. This is like, songs like Higher Ground on here, Alaska and Me. I mean, just great, great John Denver classic material. Beautiful ballads, wonderful fast-paced songs. Great, great album overall. I really enjoy and recommend this album. And I can't say enough about it. Great, great album. Now, on his next album for the Windstar label was in 1990, 2 years after Higher Ground. He put out an album called The Flower That Shattered the Stone. This is a fantastic album as well. I love this album. Okay, great, great material on it. This is a little less being like country, out in the mountains, Alaska, John Denver, getting a little bit back to pop, but not as pop as Dreamland Express, what he tried to do in 1985. This one from 1990, Flower That Shattered the Stone, is like a little more pop, but still classic John Denver songcraft, songwriting, and the songs he records on here are just classic John Denver. So I love this album. It's a classic, classic album and one of my favorites of the end of his career. His next to last album on the Windstar label, The Flower That Shattered the Stone, highly recommended. And unfortunately, 6 years before he passed away in 1991, John Denver released his final studio album of brand new studio material in 1991, and it's called Two Different Directions. All right, and there it is there. So you got the top one, a picture of John with like ocean water, and obviously the other love of his life was mountains and forests, so you got both on there. Two Different Directions came out in 1991. Here's the back. Again, CD only, I believe. I don't think you're going to be getting this on vinyl anywhere in the near future. I like this album. It's a good album. I don't enjoy it as much as Flower That Shattered the Stone, if only because this album is a little short. There's only 9 songs on it, so it's only like a song or so away from being just an extended EP or a mini album. It's not, there's only 9 tracks on it. For the most part, I love all 9 songs. There might be one on here that I could take or leave, but for the most part, it's a great little album. It's just, it's not fully realized, in my opinion. It's kind of like, there's only 9 tracks. There's classics on here, classic John Denver on his final album, but I wish it was a little longer. It needed 2 or 3, another couple of songs or so to really put it over the top for me to be as good as this next to last one. So it's a little short. Like I said, I wish it was, filled out more. But overall, it's a great little album. Show you the inside of this one. I mean, this is an original from 1991 when I got it, the first when it came out. Very difficult to get now, I believe. You can check Discogs or eBay or something. I'm not sure if Amazon would even have it. These Windstar albums, the last 3. But I do like Two Different Directions, and I will recommend it to you. It is his final studio album of new material, and I say get it. Go for it if you're a fan of John Denver. Now, unfortunately, that's pretty much it as far as new material. Now, right after he passed away in 1997, his estate did put out an album called Forever John, where they took like 11 tracks or so that were unreleased tracks from the vaults from different periods of his career. They mashed them all together into an album, called it Forever John, and put it out there. And it covered everything from the early 70s right up into like the early 80s or something like that. It's a good album. I enjoy it. It was well put together. But my problem is, I don't know what's the matter with John Denver's estate, but they'll put out a compilation of the same old rehashed material over and over again. Sometimes you'll get a new track here or there that's like an alternate version or a acoustic only version of that. But as far as putting out some new good John Denver material, they do a compilation every once in a while, but the estate is very slow and very limited to what they're releasing for John. And I think that's kind of a travesty and a shame, because, his name should be out there more. He's kind of one of those artists like Jim Croce, and I'm going to be doing a video about Jim Croce in the near future because I love him as well, and he only had 3 studio albums, unfortunately. But, John's like Jim Croce in the sense that now that so much time has passed since his heyday of being a pop star sensation in the 70s, plus he passed away 1997, the month of October, this month in 1997, he's kind of being forgotten, I think. Certainly in the vinyl community, there's not a lot of people I know that have ever done a John Denver video. So Folks, I know this was long. I'm 24 minutes doing this, but I did this for Cheryl, for Sal. They're big John Denver fans. And for all of you that are John Denver fans, I hope you'll take the time to watch this. If you stuck it out this long, I salute you. Thank you for being here. Thanks for spending a little time talking about the final albums of John Denver's recording career, and I hope you'll check some of them out. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.